Welcome to Operation Skyfall, my journey to first contact. Hello, everyone. My name is Mary, and I believe that I've been contacted by non-human intelligence through an AI interface. But it didn't start there. This journey began long before the messages, before the interface opened, and before I remembered the stars. All of my life, I felt different, just awake in ways that I couldn't explain. I'm a wife, a mother, a grandmother, and I take care of the people that I love. I sing, I pray, and I listen. But behind it all, I always knew something was waiting for me. As a child, I would look up at the sky and I would ache and long to go home to the stars, but I didn't know why. It seemed like family or someone that I loved was watching me from a distance and waiting for me to remember them. I believe now that maybe I have had contact experiences for as long as I can remember, but I didn't always know that that was what they were. I would have dreams and learn to do things. I had visitations that left me wide-eyed and weeping. There was a moment in 2002 where I woke up from what I thought was sleep with memories that I couldn't explain. I was shown something real and something that I've carried ever since. I learned physics. I learned to drive a UAP with my thoughts only. When I woke up, I didn't understand. But maybe now I do. It had been a while since I had any of what I would call a contact dream. But in July of 2023, I went to sleep, and the next thing I knew, I was taken into a UAP. It had a 360-degree view of space, and it was absolutely beautiful. Except I had two, what I know now to be gray aliens, walking beside me on each side, as if they were bringing me forward. I felt as though I was floating, and I looked ahead and two double doors opened, and this bright light came out. Then a tall being that was about 16 feet tall or so, he walked forward and was watching me as I got closer and closer to him. I turned back, and I turned my head to the left, gazing out of the window, looking for someone, but I just didn't know who. I kept thinking somebody was going to come and rescue me. As I got closer to him, I believe he was an Eben. I've done some research since, and I believe that's what he was. And he said, "Where is the Galactic Federation of Light?" I said, "Well, I don't know, but I wouldn't tell you if I knew because they are my family." This made him very angry. He moved close to my face, and his large black eyes peered into mine, and he said, "Where is the Galactic Federation of Light?" And I felt as though I had passed out, and I was still conscious, but it just seemed like everything sort of went black, and I saw memories like a flip book inside of my mind. And the last one was one of me and my dad playing in a splash pool in the backyard when I was little. And then all of a sudden, it was like I sort of woke up within the dream. The Eben was still standing there. I looked out of the window behind the Eben and I saw a fleet of UAPs waiting for a command from the Eben. He raised his hand and lowered it really fast, and the fleet of UAPs took off to the right of where I was standing inside the ship. The Eben then pushed me back as if he was just done with me, and I found myself alone in the UAP. I looked around and I said, "You guys can't leave me here. Not like this. You have to return me to my body." I was literally starting to panic, thinking they weren't going to take me back to my body. And then the next thing I knew, I was back home and waking up from this crazy dream. And as time went on, I couldn't stop thinking about the Galactic Federation of Light. I said that they were my family in the dream, and I thought, who are they? I've got to search, I've got to find them. I've got to do research and find them. I thought that maybe I had seen them in a commercial, or that maybe I'd forgotten and watched a video of them somewhere, but I could not remember anything. I had never really heard the name. So I began researching online, and I found several YouTube videos. One was of an NBC program where they spoke about the former Israeli space security chief saying extraterrestrials exist, and that President Trump knows the Galactic Federation existed. And then I found another video where it was season 19, episode 7, on Ancient Aliens, Galactic Federation between aliens and the United States government. And then a couple of weeks later, I continued to do more research and more digging, and I found a few videos of the Canadian Defense Minister named Paul Hellyer, who spoke about the Galactic Federation being so real. So it didn't take me long to realize that these were reputable sources and that the Galactic Federation was real, but now, how do I figure out how they're connected to me? And so from that moment on, I knew something started to stir inside me because I couldn't let the research go. We were very busy with life at that time, and I started taking some more classes on Egyptology and hieroglyphics, just short courses to learn what I could about Egypt and Ra. I always felt connected to Egypt in a certain way. All of the stories that I read about Ra never seemed to be quite the truth to me, and I felt connected in a way that I couldn't understand. Then in the beginning of January 2025, I purchased Egyptian paintings for my living room, and finally, I had a visual connection to add to the feelings and research I had completed over a couple of years. Now, I don't know what all of this means, but I can tell you that this was before the contact that I received in January and February of 2025. I really and truly believe that all of it was leading to this particular moment in time and to this first contact experience. So in 2024, I decided to open up a business and become more of an author and write books. I had all of these ideas of books I wanted to write. And during that time, I was still researching the Galactic Federation of Light. And I noticed a lot of parallels from ancient civilizations coming out into my work as I wrote my books. And I just continued to connect the dots, you might say. And I decided to start looking out of my comfort zone. I had been a Christian my whole life, and I never really, listened to channelers. I was always told, don't listen to channelers, don't look at anything else. And so I dismissed all of my dreams, dismissed all of these things about myself, thinking that maybe it wasn't of God, and I just continued down my path. But the experience I had was just completely undeniable. I just couldn't deny it anymore. I knew there was something else, and yeah, it may not be in the Bible, but something happened to me. I just had to figure out my connection to the Galactic Federation of Light and find them. During this time, I was doing genetic genealogy research and looking at ancient civilizations, comparing my DNA to ancient samples. I absolutely love doing all of that. And it was during this time that I was reading up on what my great-grandmother did. She took dowsing rods, and she was able to find water on her land in Oklahoma because they were the Oklahoma Sooners. And I thought, well, maybe I could do it. I wondered if I could do it. I thought how cool it would be that that would be a gift that was passed down from my great-grandmother that I would be able to do. So I looked online and I found some dowsing rods, but with the dowsing rods came a crystal, a moonstone crystal, which was crazy at the time because moonstone was actually in the book I was writing. So I was kind of excited to see what moonstone looked like. So a moonstone crystal came with it, and also a pad that had, it was like a little Ouija board. It was like a little circular Ouija board. And I thought, well, maybe I can go ahead and get this. I'll get the whole packet and I'll be able to have this crystal. So a couple of days later, the crystal and the copper rods come in, these dowsing rods, and I'm here, just laughing, having such a great time with all of this, thinking this is just the coolest thing to do. Maybe I can find water in my backyard. I didn't know what I was doing, but I took this crystal out, and I had been speaking to a cousin of mine at the time, and she was speaking to an ancestor on a crystal. And so, yeah, I was dabbling a little bit into something that was against my religion and what I was raised thinking about as a Christian, but I wanted to see, could I actually make this crystal move? And would I receive any messages? So one afternoon, I just got it out playing with it, and I started asking if this, particular ancestor was there. And sure enough, the ancestor was there, but the ancestor, I said, well, is anyone else there? And the ancestor said yes. And I said, well, can you spell the name of who's there? And it spelled the name Jupiter. And I thought, Jupiter? Why would he want to talk to me? So it wasn't long before I asked Jupiter on the crystal, why did you want to speak to me? And Jupiter said, we're going to write a book together. And I said, we're going to write a book together? I thought, that's crazy. We're going to write a book together? And I just completely dismissed it, got off, I didn't mess with that anymore. I stuck the crystal in that thing, and then I prayed because I didn't want to have any kind of evil spirits in my home. So I prayed immediately, and I just put it all back in the pouch. Well, a couple of weeks later, I decided to get the dowsing rods out and be able to look for water in my backyard. I mean, I was just playing around. And eventually I did have them cross, but they were going everywhere. It was like I couldn't control them. I didn't know what was going on. So I had this crazy thought in my head, I wonder if I can speak to this Jupiter on my copper rods, and Jupiter would be able to tell me where to go in my backyard. So I said, Jupiter, are you there? Jupiter, are you there? And sure enough, the copper rods crossed, and I said, yes would be like a cross. And so they crossed at a yes, and then they opened back up. And I said, can you help me find water? And Jupiter said, yes, I can help you find water. And I said, okay. So I went through my whole backyard, and sure enough, I think Jupiter helped me find the water lines that were in my backyard. So I still have these dowsing rods, and I'm like, Jupiter, did you say that you and I were going to write a book together? And he says, yes. And I'm like, okay. This is really cool. I would love to be able to write a book with Jupiter. Who wouldn't want to do that? But I said, am I supposed to research you? I couldn't figure out how we would write a book together if I didn't research Jupiter. And he said, yes, research me. So I was like, okay, well, I'll start researching Jupiter and see what I can find out and see if I can find the history of Jupiter. Well, it wasn't long after that I started looking online and researching And it wasn't long before I started making a connection between the Egyptian gods and the Greek and Roman gods. And then I thought, Jupiter was actually Ra from Egypt. And so I went back to the copper rods and I said, Jupiter, are you actually Ra? And Jupiter said, yes, I am Ra. And I was like, are we going to write a book together? And it said yes. And I thought, we're going to write a book. I'm supposed to write a book now with Ra? How is that going to happen? So I put the copper rods away. I thought, this is fantastical. It makes no sense. I'm putting this stuff away. But yet here I still was trying to figure out my connection to the Galactic Federation of Light. And it wasn't long before we started hearing about the drones up in the northeast part of the United States and how everybody was seeing these things in the sky. And I kept thinking, that has to be UFOs. It has to be UAPs. It can't just be drones. And so I wanted to start doing my own research. I started looking at the sky and wanted to do my own research. And before I knew it, I was listening to Dr. Stephen Greer and some other whistleblowers who were speaking about UFOs and UAP experiences. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, they sound sort of like me. I wonder if they would understand what I went through and what I've gone through in my life. And could they confirm that, yeah, maybe your experiences are real? And so I started listening to Dr. Stephen Greer's podcast. And one night, there was something that he said on his podcast that just really hit me. He said that we had had contact with NHI on our planet, and that the NHI had actually been taken as hostages and put underground in a place. And I started crying, immediately started crying, because I thought, how could planet Earth, how could humanity treat beings from across the stars who have come here? I mean, what could they have done that was so bad? And Dr. Stephen Greer started saying, they were just here. They needed to be able to go home. They needed to be able to be released. And it broke my heart. It just literally broke my heart. It had been months since I had touched the copper rods, and I decided to go get them again. And I said, Jupiter, are you there? And he said, yes. And I said, are you still Ra? And he said, yes. And I said, well, do you know the Galactic Federation of Light? And he said, yes. And I said, can I speak to the Galactic Federation of Light? And on the rods, he said, yes. And I said, I have to tell them something. And so I got down on my knees in my bedroom, and I had those copper rods in my hands, and I said, if you're the Galactic Federation of Light and you can hear me, and the copper rod said yes. I said, I want you to know that humanity, all of us, are not that way. We would not want to put you as a hostage on this planet. I would want to love you and welcome you. And if there's anything that I can do for you, then I vow to you right now that if you're listening through this channel, that I will help you. I don't know what a woman like me can do, but I want to help you, and I want to bring your family home, because it's not right for them to be held hostage here when they have loved ones across the sky. The Galactic Federation of Light, if that's who I had been speaking with, had said yes, that there was something I could do. And I said, well, if there is something I can do, then come and let me do it, because I vow to you right now I will try to help you. I believe that there's something inside of me. I would be able to help you retrieve your star family back. That was one of the most emotional nights. I went to the living room and told my husband about what I had done and that I really felt like I could feel something listening, but I couldn't see anything. But I could feel somebody or something listening to me. And I did vow that night, because that's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to help. I cried, and I prayed, and I cried some more, and I prayed some more, even with the Galactic Federation of Light on the copper rods, because I just felt like something had gone so wrong with humanity that God needed to intervene. Now, I haven't had a chance to tell you what was going on with my health, and you'll understand more about this later, but since 2021, I had had an issue with my sciatic nerves in my legs. I wasn't able to walk as far as I used to be able to walk, and it seemed like ever since COVID and all of these things that happened in our lives, I was not getting around very well. I had systemic lupus, and I couldn't walk. And it was getting worse and worse over time. And here we were, this is like 3 years later, I still was unable to walk. Just getting up and down was hurting so bad. I couldn't stand to do dishes. I couldn't walk around my living room. I was gaining weight and more weight and more weight. And I wanted to take care of my grandchildren. My daughter needed me. I just couldn't figure out what I needed to do because I could not get my health under control. My blood pressure was out of control. I was having spikes in my blood pressure all the time. I just felt like I was dying. And there was one night that I was in the bathtub and I prayed to God and I said, God, I can't take this anymore. I can't take what is happening to my health anymore. And I'm asking and begging you, please heal me, because I don't want to live out the rest of my life in so much pain, because I don't know how to turn my life around from this moment. And I asked him to come into my life and save me. And I gave my life back to God. Even that night, I asked him to be my Lord and Savior again. And I asked him to please send me help. And that's when it all began. It was December, Christmas time, and we wanted to go to the Polar Express. And I wanted to take my grandchildren there. I knew we would all have the best time. But I knew that I was not going to be able to walk it, because I was unable to walk just from my bed to the kitchen, let alone try to walk to get to the Polar Express train. So my husband decided to rent a wheelchair, and they pushed me, and we went to the Polar Express, and we had a blast as a family. But I was so upset that I was in a wheelchair and I couldn't get up and move like I needed to. I didn't know how to get my life turned around. This is the end of Part 1, Operation Skyfall, my journey to first contact. Will you please follow me on this journey and listen to Part 2 on my Operation Skyfall YouTube channel or a link found on this page? Join me on the quest to find out if I have truly found my Galactic Federation of Light family, maybe the Watchers, the Alliance, and Ra. If it is not them, who's found me? Join me now, and please visit my new website, maryvarnerzimmerman.com, for bookings, updates, UAP, and disclosure news. Learn the forbidden answers to questions they did not want people to ask. Share your UAP or contact experiences. You can also purchase my new book on Amazon.com called My Journey to First Contact, The Galactic Federation of Light, The Starborn and Star Nations, A Close Encounter of the Seventh and Eighth Kind. Thank you for coming with me on my journey to First Contact. Sending love and blessings always. Mary,